There is a storm that never speaks in words. It lives behind the eyes of men who clench their fists not out of power but out of fear. Fear of being seen, fear of being known, fear of collapsing into the little boy they buried beneath years of armor and silence. And that boy is still in there, kneeling in the ruins of something sacred that was never protected, screaming in a pitch too silent for the world to hear. He was not born to dominate. He was born to be held, to be taught how to hold his own chaos without letting it bleed onto others. But no one held him. So now he holds everyone else in a vice grip, not out of strength, but because he never learned how to let go. Behind every controlling man is an unhealed boy who is punished for needing love. Not discipline, not correction, love. That primal warmth that teaches a child you're safe to exist, safe to feel, safe to not have the answers. But instead he was taught that vulnerability is a sin, that stillness is laziness, that tears are disgraceful. And so he built a throne out of masks, king of nothing but the echo chamber of his own defensiveness. This is not an attack, this is a revelation. Because if you've lived your whole life trying to control others, your partner, your friends, your environment, then this is your mirror. Not to shame you, but to wake you. You were never meant to be a tyrant. But when a boy grows up in a world that equates gentleness with weakness, he learns to crush before he's crushed, to demand before he's denied, to command before he's abandoned. Control becomes his last defense against being shattered again. But here's the truth no one told him. Control is the prison he built to protect himself from pain, and now it has become the very source of his suffering. You see, men don't become controlling because they're powerful. They become controlling because they're terrified. Terrified of the mess inside. Terrified of what it means to feel helpless again. So they externalize the war trying to organize the chaos outside because they can't sit with the chaos within. And society feeds this sickness. From locker rooms to boardrooms, boys are rewarded for domination, for aggression, for stoicism. Not the kind of stoicism Marcus Aurelius taught, but the shallow performance of numbness, the refusal to feel, the rejection of soul. And so we breed generations of men who wear silence like a badge of honor and mistake fear for control. But what if I told you that the man who controls everything around him is the most out of control within himself? That he doesn't trust life, doesn't trust people, doesn't trust himself, because somewhere in his past, trust was a trap. Maybe his father was a tyrant, or absent, or unpredictable. Maybe he watched his mother shrink to fit into someone else's expectations. Maybe he learned that love meant obedience and disagreement meant exile. So he built his entire personality not around who he is, but around who he had to be to survive. This is not masculinity. This is trauma in disguise. And trauma has a way of turning us into the very thing we swore we'd never become. The boy who watched his family fall apart becomes the man obsessed with control. Not because he wants power, but because deep down he's afraid that if he doesn't hold it all together, everything will collapse again. But he doesn't realize it already has. You cannot build connection on top of fear. You cannot dominate your way into intimacy. You cannot heal your past by controlling your future. Real strength is not control. Real strength is integration. To turn toward that trembling boy within and say, I see you. You don't have to fight anymore. That is strength. That is rebirth. But this world doesn't reward that kind of strength. This world laughs at men who cry. It mocks men who speak with honesty. It brands emotional depth as weakness and emotional detachment as mastery. And so we create a culture of armored men, ruthless, polished, efficient, and dying inside. Men who don't know how to be loved unless they're in control. Men who mistake submission for devotion. Men who confuse silence for peace. But no woman can reach the man who is too afraid to be touched. No child can learn trust from a father who cannot trust himself. And no legacy is ever built from fear, it's built from healing. The boy inside you is not your enemy, he's your origin. He's not the weak part of you. He's the only part of you that remembers who you were before the mask was forged. Before you learned to perform, before you became the projection of a father you feared, or the rejection of a father you never had. And maybe you've hurt people, maybe you've controlled your partner, shamed your friends, sabotaged your peace. That doesn't make you evil, it makes you unhealed. But healing is not for cowards. Healing requires you to go back into the fire, not as a boy seeking rescue, but as a man reclaiming his soul. And when you do, you'll find something buried beneath the rubble, a truth that once terrified you, a truth that now frees you. You never needed control. You needed to be seen. You needed to be known beyond your armor. You needed someone to say, you're not the roles you've played. You're not the mask. You're not the tyrant you became in order to survive. You're the one who still dares to feel beneath the ruins, who still longs for something real, who still remembers a time when love didn't feel like war. But now, it's your turn to end the war. Not by fighting harder, but by surrendering to the truth you've avoided your entire life. Control is a cage, and you are not a prisoner. You are not a prisoner, but you've been living like one, trapped in a cell made of your own image. The strong man, the provider, the protector, the one who always has the answers, always in command, never faltering, never flinching. But it's all a script, isn't it? A play written long before you were old enough to question the role you were cast in. And so you perform, over and over again. You micromanage your life, your relationships, your emotions, because you're terrified of what would happen if you let go of the script. If you let people see the man underneath the performance, the man who doubts, the man who aches, the man who wonders if he's even worthy of love, if he's not controlling everything around him, that fear is not weakness. That fear is the gateway. Because only when you face it, not run from it, not mask it though, you begin to understand what real power is. Real power is not domination, it's authenticity. It's the quiet knowing that nothing in this world can take away who you are once you've made peace with the parts you've disowned. That's why so many controlling men are exhausted. Their entire life is spent policing the world around them, managing perception, maintaining dominance, keeping everything in line, as if one crack in the system will cause them to collapse. And maybe it will. Because what's built on fear always crumbles. But what's built on truth endures. Let's talk about the truth you've buried, the things you've never said out loud. Maybe it's the shame you carry from childhood, the time you cried and someone laughed, the time you were scared and someone called you soft, the time you tried to express something vulnerable and got punished for it. And slowly, a narrative took root inside you. I must not be weak. I must not feel. I must control. But that narrative didn't make you stronger. It made you split. Split between who you are and who you pretend to be. Split between the man you show to the world and the boy you locked in the basement of your soul. And every time life shakes your walls, that boy rattles his chain. Every time someone gets too close, he panics because he remembers what it felt like to be abandoned. He remembers what it felt like to be powerless. And so you push people away before they can get close enough to see him. But he doesn't need protection anymore. He needs integration. You don't heal the inner child by ignoring him. You heal him by becoming the man he needed all along. Not the man who controls the world, but the man who holds space for every broken, beautiful, trembling part of himself. And that's the paradox. You stop controlling when you start accepting. When you finally say, yes, I've been scared. Yes, I felt inadequate. Yes, I've hurt people trying to protect myself. That confession isn't weakness. That confession is strength. Because only the strong can look themselves in the mirror without flinching. Only the strong can take off the mask. And when you do, you find that what you were chasing through control was never control at all. You were chasing safety, connection, worthiness, and none of those things can be seized by force. They can only be received, allowed, chosen. Control is a substitute for intimacy. A false god we bow to when we don't trust real connection, because real connection requires exposure. It requires us to be naked in a world that taught us to be armored. But what if I told you that your armor is rusting? That it's not protecting you, it's choking you? There's a better way. The man who trusts himself doesn't need to control others. He doesn't need to dominate. He doesn't need to manipulate. He simply is unshakable. Not because he controls the storm, but because he has become the eye of it. Still, grounded, awake. That's what real power looks like. It's not loud. It's not aggressive. It's not wrapped in ego. It's quiet, like gravity, unseen but undeniable. And when you embody that kind of power, people feel it. They don't obey you, they respect you. They don't fear you, they trust you, because you've earned that trust by doing the hardest thing any man can do. Turning inward, owning your shadow, breaking the generational chains of control that bound your father and his father before him. You see, this is not just about you. This is about the legacy you leave behind, the sons you raise, the partners you love, the life you build. Will it be ruled by fear or led by presence? The unhealed boy reacts. The healed man responds. The unhealed boy demands obedience. The healed man invites truth. The unhealed boy needs to win. The healed man wants to connect. Which one are you becoming? Because every day you make a choice to continue the cycle or to burn the mask, to stay enslaved by your need for control or to rise into something freer, truer, real. And yes, it will hurt. There will be days when you want to put the armor back on, days when your past screams louder than your future. But if you stay the course, if you keep walking, you'll come face to face with something you haven't felt in years. Peace. Not the peace that comes from silence, but the peace that comes from no longer running, no longer hiding, no longer pretending, no longer pretending to be untouchable, no longer pretending that power is the absence of pain, no longer pretending that control is the same as love. Because love is not control, love is freedom. And when you've built your identity around control, freedom feels terrifying, foreign, like walking into a room without armor, without a plan, without a weapon. But that is where your liberation begins, when you stop needing to defend yourself from life. Control is rooted in fear of the unknown, but freedom is forged in trust. Trust in your own ability to meet the unknown with presence, not panic. That's why most controlling men can't relax. Stillness feels unsafe. They don't know how to sit without scanning the environment, without anticipating a threat, because stillness exposes the inner noise. And if you're not at peace within, silence feels like a threat, not a gift. But here's the paradox. The more you control, the more you lose. You lose intimacy. You lose connection. You lose your sense of self. Because control demands that you shrink the world down to a size your fear can manage. And that world is always too small for the man you were born to be. So instead, you must expand. Grow beyond the edges of your fear. Breathe into the space that control once occupied. Learn to let life move through you instead of trying to bend it to your will. This is what it means to reclaim your soul. Carl Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The man who controls everything is being controlled by his unconscious, by his wounds, by his fears, by the unhealed boy who still believes he is unsafe. But when you bring that to light, when you see your patterns, your triggers, your shadows not as shameful flaws, but as invitations to grow, everything changes. You stop needing to manage everyone's perception of you. You stop needing to dominate every space you enter. You stop needing to win arguments just to feel worthy, because you finally realize that your worth was never up for debate. It's not based on your control. It's based on your presence, on your capacity to be real, to be whole, to be human. And that's what the world needs now, real men. Not perfect men, not dominant men, not emotionally armored soldiers who conquer everything but themselves. But men who are willing to face themselves with honesty and grace, men who are no longer afraid of their own reflection, men who know that healing isn't a soft word, it's a revolutionary act, because when you heal, you break a lineage of silence, of suppression, of control, disguised as care. When you heal, you stop passing your pain forward. You become a mirror for others to do the same. And yes, the journey is lonely at first, because few are willing to walk into their own shadows. But once you do, you start to attract people who've walked that same road. People who don't need to be controlled, because they've learned how to hold themselves. Partners who meet you with truth, not games. Friends who challenge you with love, not ego. Spaces where you can finally breathe without bracing for war. And maybe for the first time, you realize that the boy inside you doesn't need to be erased. He needs to be led. Not by fear, not by force, but by the man you are becoming, the one who chooses truth over control, presence over power, love over domination. And this is not weakness. This is the fiercest kind of courage, because any man can command others, but only a few dare to command themselves. So ask yourself, what kind of man am I becoming? One who is feared, or one who is trusted? One who is obeyed, or one who is loved? One who hides his wounds behind armor, or one who reveals them as proof that he has survived? You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to have all the answers, but you do need to be honest, because healing starts with truth. The truth that the need to control is not a personality trait, it's a survival mechanism. The truth that your rage isn't who you are. It's the voice of your unmet needs. The truth that your relationships don't thrive when you control them, they thrive when you nurture them. And the truth that you are not unlovable. You are simply unpracticed at being seen. But you can learn. You can unlearn the lies. You can strip off the armor, even if it's been welded to your skin. And beneath it, you'll find something ancient, something wild, something holy. The boy who once believed in love. The man who is no longer afraid to lead with his heart. Not because it's safe, but because it's right. Because it's right not by the standards of a world addicted to control, but by the laws written deep within your soul. The laws that existed before society told you how a man should behave. Before you were taught to silence your instincts. Before you were groomed to perform strength rather than embody it. You were not born to be hollow. You were not born to walk through life like a ghost in your own body, haunted by echoes of everything you were never allowed to express. You were born to be fire, to burn through the illusions, to light the way not just for yourself, but for the others still shackled in the shadows, those still confusing dominance with confidence, still mistaking suppression for discipline, still building empires of control on the ruins of a boy who never learned how to feel. And you don't owe the world your compliance. You owe yourself your freedom. So burn the scripts, burn the expectations, burn the idea that you have to be either a tyrant or a failure. You are not either or. You are both and. You are the calm and the storm, the protector and the wounded, the leader and the learner, the one who broke and the one who rebuilt. That duality is your power. And when you stop resisting it, when you begin to embrace the full spectrum of your humanity, something sacred happens. You begin to lead from essence, not ego. You stop chasing control like a drug and start embodying presence like a king. Not a king who rules by fear, but one who rules by example, by grace, by clarity, by depth. You become the man others feel safe around, not because you silence them, but because your own silence is no longer violent. You become the man whose presence speaks louder than his voice, whose stillness commands more respect than his rage ever did, whose love is not a tool of leverage, but a sacred offering. And yes, that journey is brutal. Yes, it means losing the identity you built on survival. But what you gain in return is something no one can give you and no one can take away. Your wholeness, your sovereignty, your soul. Because the man who no longer needs to control is the man who has finally remembered who he is. Not the mask, not the role, not the performance, but the eternal flame underneath it all. The part of you that was never broken, only buried. The part of you that dares to feel fully, to live truthfully, to love without armor and lead without fear. And when you arrive there, when you finally stand inside your own skin without apology or pretense, you don't just free yourself. You free every man watching, every boy learning, every soul waiting. Because when one man burns the mask, it becomes a torch for the others still trapped in darkness. So let it burn, let it all burn. The mask, the control, the fear, the illusion. Burn it not out of anger, but out of reverence for the man waiting on the other side. The man you were before the world tamed you. The one who no longer needs to dominate because he has already won the only war that ever mattered. The war within. And now, with the fire quieted, with the last mask reduced to ash beneath your feet, you stand. Unhidden, unarmored, no longer needing to become anything but exactly who you are. You are no longer the trembling boy seeking acceptance in the eyes of others. You are the man that boy waited for his entire life, steady, deep, and unafraid to walk into his own darkness. No one gave you this. No one granted you permission. You claimed it through tears, through choices, through the defiant act of facing your wounds instead of running from them. You crossed a threshold no one taught you existed, a place where real men are born, not through power, but through awakening. And this world, the one that taught you to control, to dominate, to suppress, no longer holds you, because you no longer live to fit into the world. You live to reignite its soul through your own truth. You are living proof that a man can be strong and still be soft, that he can be decisive and still be compassionate, that he can feel deeply without being ruled by emotion, that he can love fiercely without needing to possess. And if anyone ever asks, who are you without control? You'll smile and answer with silence, because your presence is the answer. A man no longer ruled by fear, no longer hidden behind performance, no longer seeking validation from the outside. You are yourself whole, unapologetic and fully revealed. And from that truth, a new empire rises, not built on domination, but on eyes that truly see, a heart that dares to feel, and a soul that refuses to die in the cage of what a man was supposed to be. No more masks, no more chains. Only you, free, true, and utterly unshakable. There's a truth no one will tell you until it's too late. If you don't lead, the marriage will rot from the inside out, quietly, slowly. Then, all at once, not with betrayal, but with neglect, not with shouting, but with silence. She will not scream. She will not beg. She will not announce her departure. She will disappear while standing right in front of you, because when a man refuses to lead, a woman is forced to become something she was never meant to be, the container of everything, the decision maker, the emotional regulator, the planner, the fixer, the initiator, the parent of the household and of you. And the thing about women is they'll carry it all for a while. They'll lift what you drop. They'll soften what you harden. They'll hold the family, the home, the rhythm, even as it crushes their essence. But one day, they stop. Not because they're weak, but because their soul knows it was never designed to carry both roles forever. She wasn't made to lead both herself and the man she trusted to protect her from the world, and worse, from the weight of her own masculine. You see, leadership isn't about dominance. It's not about barking orders or micromanaging emotions. Leadership in the sacred domain of marriage is about direction. It's about embodying clarity when everything around her is chaos. It's about moving toward truth, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it threatens the ego, even when it breaks your pride. Because a man who doesn't lead creates a void. And nature, God, the universe, they all hate a void. That space will be filled by anxiety, by resentment, by confusion, by masculine energy she never wanted to activate in the first place. And the tragedy is, most men don't see it happening until she's already gone, because they were taught that presence was enough. That provision was love. That silence was stability. But presence without leadership is passive. Provision without direction is chaos wrapped in comfort. And silence? Silence is a vacuum that devours her voice. The feminine does not thrive in ambiguity. It needs to be held, not controlled, not caged. Held in truth, held in clarity, held in the unwavering energy of a man who knows who he is, where he's going, and what he stands for. A man who leads not from arrogance, but from alignment. Not from fear, but from vision. Not to impress, but to protect. And if you are not that man, not yet, then hear this. You are not broken, but you are asleep. And sleep is dangerous when others are depending on your direction. Because when you won't decide, someone else will. She will. And she'll resent you for it. Not openly, but in those small, quiet moments that add up over years. In the way her touch withdraws, in the way her tone shifts, in the way her eyes stop looking at you with trust and start scanning you for weakness. She may still love you, but she won't relax into you. And once a woman cannot rest in a man's energy, the polarity dies. And without polarity, all you have is logistics, co-parenting, bills, meals, dead sex and fake smiles, a roommate, a business partner, a ghost of what could have been. So lead, not with bravado, not with force, but with presence, with consistency, with the kind of grounded, immovable energy that makes her nervous system exhale. Not because you're perfect, but because you decide. Because you listen, you adjust, you move. Because when things are spinning out of control, your feet are on the ground, your eyes are forward, your hands are open, and she knows, I can follow that. That's what she's craving. Not perfection, direction. That's what restores the order. That's what heals the polarity. That's what brings back the respect. Because no matter what culture tells you, she wants to surrender. Not her power, her tension, but only to a man who knows where he's going, who knows what he stands for, who doesn't flinch when she tests or cry when she pulls away. And if you don't become that man, someone else will. And she will follow him, not out of disloyalty, out of instinct, because the feminine follows energy, not promises. And energy doesn't lie. She can feel the difference between a man who's grounded and a man who's guessing, between a man who leads with presence and one who leads with pressure, between a man who moves from internal conviction and one who only reacts to her moods. She knows it instinctively, in her bones, because she was born to be led not in submission, but in sacred trust, the kind of trust that says, I can let go, because he's already holding it. But if you refuse to hold it, she will. She will take the lead. She will map the path. She will carry the weight, not because she wants to, but because she must. Because the alternative waiting for a man who never steps forward is spiritual starvation. You think she's cold? No. She's tired. Tired of hinting. Tired of suggesting. Tired of mothering a man who calls himself her husband. And every time you hesitate, every time you defer, avoid, collapse into whatever you want, babe, a part of her shuts down. A part of her says, I can't trust him. And trust is not about loyalty. Trust is about depth. Trust is a ability to soften into you, to relax the constant vigilance of having to be everything. When you stop leading, she starts guarding. And the guarded woman is not who you fell in love with. The guarded woman is not sensual. She's efficient. She's not romantic. She's responsible. She doesn't play. She plans. And you'll notice it in the subtle withdrawal, in the edge to her voice, in the way her body stops responding to your touch. Not because she stopped loving you, but because she's exhausted from carrying the masculine. The tragedy? She won't tell you. Not directly, not loudly. She'll hint. She'll give you chances. She'll wait for years, maybe. But make no mistake. Every day you refuse to lead is another day she builds a world where she doesn't need you anymore. And when that world is complete, she's gone. Not physically. At first, she'll still be there. But her essence vanished. Because when a woman loses the ability to trust her man's leadership, the relationship becomes a negotiation, not a union. It becomes management, delegation, schedules, responsibilities. But no polarity, no passion, no presence. Just a dead ritual of routine where no one's really living, just surviving each other. You want to fix it? Then lead. Lead yourself first. Because leadership doesn't start with controlling her. It starts with commanding your own soul. It starts with taking ownership of your thoughts, your purpose, your direction, your emotional state. It starts with clarity, knowing where you're going, what you're building, who you are when the storms come. And from there, you extend that clarity outward. You hold her confusion without absorbing it. You navigate disagreement without losing presence. You lead through chaos without becoming chaotic. That's what she's watching for. She doesn't need you to be right. She needs you to be rooted. She needs to feel that when the world shakes, you won't crumble. And when she tests you, and she's not trying to destroy you, she's trying to find out if there's anything real behind your chest. She's trying to know, can I trust him when I can't trust myself? Can I fall apart in his presence and know he won't retreat? Can I surrender? Not because I'm weak, but because his strength calls me home. And if the answer is no, if you flinch, if you flee, if you turn her expression of pain into an attack on your masculinity, you lose her, bit by bit, test by failed test. Until one day, you wake up next to a stranger and wonder why she looks at you like a man she can't follow. So stop asking for her submission if you haven't earned her trust. Stop demanding respect if you won't first respect yourself enough to lead with purpose. Stop blaming her disconnection when you've been disconnected from your own mission for years. This isn't about control. It's about container. It's about being the space where her feminine can bloom, not because you force it, but because your presence invites it. And if you can do that, if you can lead not from fear, but from vision, she will follow, not because she has to, but because she wants to, because her soul was waiting for the day you remembered who you are. She was waiting for the day you returned to your throne. Not the throne of dominance, but the throne of divine masculinity. the place inside you where clarity lives, where direction is not a burden but a birthright, where responsibility isn't resentment, it's reverence. She was waiting for the day you stopped hiding behind easygoing, behind I just want peace, behind the lie that passivity is kindness. Passivity is not kindness. It's cowardice, dressed in politeness. And she can feel the difference. Because a man who leads from love, from grounded certainty, from embodied presence, makes her feel safe. Not safe like locked doors and paid bills. Safe like the ground beneath her won't vanish when she finally lets go. Safe like she can descend into her depths, her chaos, her creativity, her emotion, and you'll be there, unmoved, unshaken, because you've made peace with your own shadow, because you've walked into your own fire and returned with the authority of someone who no longer runs. This is what leadership is. It's not being louder. It's not being richer. It's not being the man of the house. It's being the man who can hold the storm in her, the storm in life, the storm in yourself. And do you know what happens when you hold it? She softens. Not immediately, not dramatically, not like in the movies, but slowly, gently, like thawing ice, returning to water. She will begin to trust, not your words, your energy, because energy doesn't lie, and she feels everything. She will test you, yes, but only because she wants to see what's real. Can you stay steady when her emotions spike? Can you make decisions that serve the family, not just your pride? Can you take the lead on the little things, the hard conversations, the daily rhythms, the vision of the life you're building? Not to prove your manhood, but because your soul knows it's time. Because you're done watching your marriage drift into duty and your wife drift into numbness. Because you're done mistaking her exhaustion for independence. Because you're done waiting for her to come to you when all along she was waiting for you to come back to yourself. This is your moment. Not to dominate, to define the direction, the standard, the tone, not by controlling her, by mastering you. Because the greatest leaders don't lead with commands. They lead by example. So show her. Show her what steadiness looks like. Show her what devotion feels like, not just when it's romantic, but when it's ordinary. Show her what integrity is, the kind that holds firm, even when she's emotional, even when she's distant, even when she's lost faith. Not to fix her, to guide her back to herself by being the man who never left his post. And in that, she will find her rest again. In that, she will remember her softness. In that, she will no longer have to carry what was never hers. And she will follow, because she'll know, not by your words, not by your demands, but by your presence, that you are finally leading. And when you lead, truly lead not with noise, not with ego, but with the quiet thunder of purpose everything begins to shift. She starts to breathe differently around you. Not shallow and guarded, but deep, relaxed, and surrendered. Like her body finally trusts what her mind doubted for so long. She starts to look at you differently, not with suspicion, but with reverence. Not because you demanded it, but because you earned it. Because she can feel that you're no longer drifting, you're anchored. You've stopped waiting to be told what to do. You've stopped outsourcing your decisions. You've stopped chasing comfort and calling it love. You've become the mountain she can lean into. Not because she's weak, but because she's strong enough to finally rest. That's what your leadership gives her. Not subservience. Safety. Not obedience. Openness. And now, the marriage that once felt like management begins to feel like movement. Not perfect, not without storms, but alive. Because leadership revives what passivity kills. It reintroduces direction into dead spaces. It resurrects polarity from emotional collapse. It breathes structure into chaos. And structure is not oppression, it's freedom. It's the invisible skeleton that allows the feminine to dance. It's the container that allows her to flow, to create, to seduce, to nurture, not because she has to, but because she gets to. Because the one thing more attractive to a woman than passion is certainty. Certainty in yourself, in your values, in your word, in your vision. Not because you're never wrong, but because when you are, you own it. You adjust. You lead again. That's the kind of man she follows. Not the perfect one, the present one. The one who sees further than today's drama. The one who protects the future without panicking in the present. The one who creates the emotional architecture for her to surrender while trusting that if she falls, he'll still be standing. That is what makes her want to give you everything. Not because she's programmed to, because her heart remembers. Remembers the design of a sacred union before the world distorted it with power games and politics, where the masculine leads with integrity, where the feminine follows with freedom, where trust flows not from titles, but from truth, and know where you are. At the doorway of that truth, no more excuses, no more waiting, no more watching her drift and wondering why she doesn't smile like she used to. It's not too late, but it will be if you don't step in now. If you don't reclaim the role the marriage has been begging you to take up, not as dictator, not as savior, as leader, as the one who holds the center when everything else spins, as the one who speaks when silence becomes avoidance, as the one who chooses growth over ego and presence over power. Because if you don't lead, the marriage will collapse into chaos, and she'll leave, not to punish you, to preserve herself. But if you lead, if you decide today to rise to the calling that's been echoing in your chest since before you even knew what manhood was, she'll follow. Because the feminine always knows when it is safe to surrender. And now she watches quietly, not with words, but with her whole body, her whole heart, her whole being, asking one silent question that determines everything. Can I trust him now? Answer her without speaking. Answer her with how you show up tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that, not with promises, with presence, not with domination, with devotion, not with performance, with power, because the time for waiting is over. Now is the moment you lead. Lead not just when it's easy, not just when she's soft and smiling, not just when the house is quiet and life is calm. Lead when she tests you. Lead when she's distant, when she's in a storm, when everything in you wants to pull away or lash out or shut down. Lead especially then. Because leadership in love is not about control, it's about consistency. It's about being the steady presence when everything around you trembles. The force that doesn't flinch when things fall apart. Because here's what they never taught you. Love isn't built in the highs, it's revealed in the lows. Any man can play the leader when she's in her light, when the path is clear, when the days are simple. But real leadership is forged when things go dark, when she questions you, when she withdraws her trust to see if it was ever safe to give it in the first place. When she loses faith not just in you, but in men, in marriage, in herself. And in those moments, what she needs is not a perfect man, but a present one. A man who doesn't collapse. A man who doesn't make her pain about himself. A man who can hold space, take feedback, and still lead without retreating into defensiveness. Because the man who can lead in those moments is a rare man. A man who knows that leadership is not about avoiding conflict, but about walking through it with vision. A man who understands that marriage is not a reward. It's a responsibility, a divine assignment to create safety for another soul. And not just physical safety, emotional safety. That's what she's watching for. Not your dominance, not your income, not your promises, your emotional authority. Can you stay calm when she cannot? Can you own your reactions? Can you protect her heart when she's too tired to protect it herself? That's leadership. It doesn't scream. It doesn't boast. It just is. And when you step into that kind of leadership, everything changes. She stops guarding. She stops overfunctioning. She stops trying to fill in the blanks of your indecision, because finally she can exhale. She can return to her feminine. She can soften, receive, bloom, not because you forced her to, but because she feels your energy and knows, I'm safe here. And when a woman feels safe, she gives everything. Her loyalty, her body, her truth, her fire, her love. And not because you asked, but because you led. This is what you were made for. Not comfort, not silence, not passivity, but presence. The kind of presence that makes her feel seen even in her darkest hour. The kind that holds her chaos without judgment. The kind that guides her not because she's lost, but because she's ready to rest. And now you know. Now the illusion is broken. Now the mirror is clear. And there's no more pretending you didn't see what she needed all along. Now, there's only one question. Will you lead? Or will you let it all collapse while she walks away, not because she stopped loving you, but because she could no longer trust you to carry what love demands? Because, make no mistake, if you don't lead, something will. And it won't be truth. It'll be resentment, confusion, chaos. But if you lead, if you truly lead with presence, with purpose, with power anchored in peace, she will follow, not behind you, beside you. And that is where the real marriage begins. And now you stand at the edge of a choice that will define everything. Not just your marriage, your manhood. Will you wait until she's gone to become the man she was praying you'd rise into? Or will you decide here, now, to lead? Not for applause, not for reward, but because the fire inside your soul will no longer tolerate passivity, because you're done watching her carry the weight you were born to hold, because you're done living in a house full of silence, shame, and unspoken needs, because you remember now leadership isn't noise, it's alignment, it's integrity, it's choosing truth even when it hurts, it's showing up when it would be easier to disappear. It's standing tall when your own fears beg you to shrink. She doesn't need perfection. She doesn't need power plays. She needs you rooted, clear, unwavering. A man she can trust. A man who doesn't just say, I've got us, but proves it with every word, every action, every breath. This is your moment to rise, to lead, to carry the weight with sacred hands. Not because she's fragile, but because she's fierce. And fierce women only surrender to men who make surrender feel like freedom, not sacrifice. So lead her not by force. Lead her by standing so fully in your truth she has no choice but to return to hers. Lead her by becoming the mountain she can finally rest against. And if you do, if you lead now, not tomorrow, not someday, but now, she will follow. And you will have not just a marriage, you will have a kingdom.